You know that show 16 and Pregnant? Well, that was me. I didn't mean for it to happen. I decided to keep my baby, and my baby daddy split, never to be heard from again. So 9 months later, I was on my own trying to care for a baby and myself. I got a full-time job, but I could hardly find enough money to buy baby food at the local mini-mart. I was depressed and overwhelmed with constantly having to choose to eat or pay my bills. I didn't want to. No one wants to. But sometimes you feel like you have no choice. I started stripping so I could just provide for my baby boy. The club owner took a special interest in me. He even let me bring my son to the club. He would play with my boy so I could work. I hated bringing him there. I never wanted my boy to see me like that. But I didn't have anyone else to call, and I couldn't afford to pay for daycare. The owner promised he'd keep my boy safe. I had no choice but to trust him. Every day when I left for work, I could feel my neighbors watching and judging me. Didn't they realize I had a baby to provide for and my family had kicked me out? Eventually, the club owner told me I owed him a favor. I really didn't think I could say no. After the first time, I told him I couldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it again. He threatened to hurt my son if I didn't. What would you have done? I had no one. It seemed like every day he had more of his friends he wanted me to have sex with. Each time, I got hurt and he got paid. I was doing it to protect my son. I kept my boss from hurting him, and I brought in just enough money to take care of him. But in time, I couldn't handle the pain anymore. To cope, I abused my body. I filled it with drugs, I cut it, I starved it until my clothes hung across bones, critiqued by its own sunken-in eyes. I wanted to disappear. I hated the body that brought me to that place, and I was intent on destroying it. My son would be better off without me. So one day, I decided death was better than this hell I was living. When I woke up in a hospital bed, I was half dead and had no idea how I got there. The nurse looked at me and said, "You were saved for a purpose." I took my son and I got the hell out of that city.
It is not enough to know Tina's story. We have to take a step beyond awareness to understand how to identify trafficked individuals and feel equipped to report suspected trafficking. To the outside world, Tina was a pregnant teen turned stripper who chose that life. The mini-mart cashier noticed a young girl who would come in and out every few days and count the change in her purse to pay for baby food. Her neighbors saw an irresponsible mother who took her child to work. The men who watched her at the club or bought her each night were told she was a prostitute and that she wanted it. They mistook her forced smiles as compliance, but failed to see the club owner watching her across the room. But if you know what to look for, you can see the signs in Tina's story. The reality is, Tina was a teen mother with no support system. Her family had kicked her out and wasn't surprised when she made another bad decision when it came to sex. The mini-mart cashier could have seen someone who spent every dime she had on food for her baby and never on herself. Her neighbors could have noticed a young mother who had no other choice but to bring her baby to work. How was she supposed to pay for her childcare when she couldn't even afford to keep the lights on? Routine clients in the club could have acknowledged the cuts on her arms, her sunken, distant eyes, and how she had become the shell of a human being. Ultimately, Tina escaped her trafficking situation with a suicide attempt and a nurse who reminded her that she had dignity and worth. Tina was one of the lucky ones. A study from the U.S. National Institutes of Health shows 45% of sex trafficking victims attempt suicide, and many survivors engage in self-harm on a regular basis. Cutting or self-harm is a way of coping with extreme psychological or emotional distress. People who work in the sex entertainment industry can find themselves in situations that often escalate to sex trafficking. Some forms of the sex entertainment industry, like strip clubs, are legal, and it can look like an individual is choosing to be a part of it. Therefore, it can be easy to overlook these illegal activities. These victims will most often intersect with community members in addiction support groups, domestic violence or homeless shelters, and church outreach programs. By being on watch and reporting suspected trafficking, you are helping protect every individual in our communities.